Hi there, friends, and welcome to an update on the volcano in Hawaii, Kilauea. Not to be outdone by all the attention we've been giving Iceland lately, this is an update on some heightened activity that we saw over the past few days in Kilauea. Thanks for joining me. I'm Geology Professor Shawn Willsey. Today is April 29th, Monday. It is about 12:30 Mountain Daylight Time as I'm recording this. And I just wanted to provide you with a little bit of an update on things that have been happening at Kilauea over the past few days. So you can see from the webcam view here that we have steaming and gases coming out of the ground within the summit crater, but that's not where most of the activity has been. Let's go ahead and look at some of the earthquake activity that has prompted a few closures in the area and just a little bit of a heightened state of unrest. They have not changed the alert level, the USGS, as of now. It's still at an advisory level, not a watch level. But let's go ahead and work our way through this. And let's maybe start with a quick overview of Kilauea on the Big Island of Hawaii. If you're new to this volcano to some degree, it has a summit caldera. That's where it has had an active lava lake in this southwestern corner over different periods in the past. Currently, it is not erupting. And then spreading out from Kilauea, there's two areas of concern that we've had over the past that have erupted, and that is the southwest rift zone, which continues off to the southwest here, and then the East Rift Zone. And you might remember the East Rift Zone because this is the area that at its lower end produced eruptions in 2018 right through this subdivision Leilani Estates and fed lava flows that went all the way down to the coastline, adding real estate to Hawaii's shore and also destroying about 700 homes in the process. So we are now going to be focusing mainly on the summit area and this upper east rift zone, which has shown signs of producing earthquakes over elevated levels of earthquakes over the past few days. Let's go first though to the USGS update, and let me just walk you through this. Now this is from yesterday. They'll put out another one at some point today. So first off, Kilauea is not erupting. Significant increase in seismicity beneath the upper east rift zone and caldera south of Halemaumau that began early yesterday is continuing with little change. Updates are provided while the heightened state of unrest continues. So earthquake activity sharply increased just after midnight on April 27th beneath the upper east rift zone and beneath the caldera, the south end of the caldera. Earthquakes are occurring at depths of 1.5 to 2.5 kilometers beneath the surface at about a rate of 10 to 15 per hour. Compared to previously, they were only getting a few per hour. So a definite, maybe fivefold or so spike in earthquake activity and frequency, which is most notable here. Over the past 24 hours, over 250 earthquakes beneath the upper east rift zone and about 50 earthquakes beneath the southern end of the caldera. Largest earthquakes were between magnitude 2 and 3, but most were smaller than a 2. Deeper earthquakes that were occurring 5 to 10 kilometers directly below Kilauea caldera over the past few weeks have ceased. So it's mainly these shallow quakes that we're seeing now. The summit area remains inflated. And then a little bit here about the overall ground deformation remain low with ongoing inflation of the summit and uplift south of the caldera. And so at this time, it's not possible to say with certainty if this increase in activity will lead to an eruption in the near future or simply remain confined below ground. However, an eruption in Kilauea's summit region or beneath the upper east rift zone within the park is one potential outcome. So yeah, some interesting times at Kilauea. It ebbs and flows like all volcanoes do, showing us more activity over time. So let's look at those earthquakes themselves. Here we can see the past days worth of earthquakes. Let me just get you a little bit oriented here. So here is the Kilauea caldera at the summit, and within that there's this nested lower lava lake that has largely solidified, but we believe there's still lava probably beneath it, but the crust has completely solidified over. So there's the outline of the Kilauea caldera, and then you can see with some of these craters here, these pit craters, here's Mauna Ulu, extending off to the first southeast and then off to the east. This is the East Rift Zone. And so we can see that cluster of quakes between the caldera, a few quakes just south of the caldera, but then a big cluster of them on this side here. And this is capturing about 87 earthquakes in this area, and these are all within the past day. So I've only searched for the past 24 hours worth of earthquakes. You can see some of those quakes in here, different magnitudes. There's a 2. Here's that 3.3, a little bit bigger one. And you can also see the depths here, 1.3 kilometers, 1.3 for that one, 0.9. So very shallow earthquakes. Most likely the interpretation here would be we have magma moving underground, but not necessarily moving to the surface. There's no clear indication that this is preceding an eruption. There could be just some space down there and the magma is shifting around in the subsurface, basically an intrusion. And as the magma moves around and occupies new spaces, that breaks rock and generates these earthquakes we're seeing here. So certainly cause for concern and further scrutiny, but nothing necessarily to suggest an eruption is imminent. Nonetheless, they are sort of in a more proactive state of things right now. They haven't changed the alert level yet. It probably would take a bigger spike in the earthquake activity and or maybe some other data that shifts the meter and maybe moves it from advisory level to watch level. So we can also see these earthquakes. Let me show you the last week or so. That might be helpful as well. So now we've added a full week's worth of earthquakes. And you can see again these two main clusters, sort of a secondary cluster here just south of the caldera, and then a more larger major cluster of quakes here in the upper east rift zone. If we zoom out a little bit, nothing else too significant around Kilauea. It's just these two regions here where we're seeing the biggest earthquakes. And if we go back to Google Earth, we can actually see these being added in. Let me take some of these orange lines out. Well, let me leave the caldera in, but I want to take the east rift zone out and maybe take out this Kauai faults, these other fault systems that are sort of these connector ones in here. And let's zoom in a little bit here and actually watch the earthquakes as they come in. Now this is going to start about a week ago or so. So it'll start on April 22nd and it'll run up through today, but it'll show us the earthquakes that have happened during that time. So just a few in here you can see coming in. Here we are on the 25th of April. You can see again those two clusters being populated here. And then as we get to April 27th, this starts to become a little bit more intense in terms of the number of quakes taking place there. And then this takes us up through today. So, so it helps you kind of appreciate and see where those earthquakes are occurring. Maybe run you through that just one more time. So, whoops, let's pull it back here. Let's take it right about here, I suppose. So this, I'll start this one now on the 24th of April. And here we are on the 25th, going into the 26th. And then it really starts ramping up here on the 27th, on Saturday, I suppose, when the quake intensity really intensified quite a bit. So there's the earthquakes in terms of location, magnitude, a little bit on the depth, and then sort of seeing them over time where those earthquakes occurred. Let's look at some more of the data coming from the USGS. And so let's look at the past week or so, the monitoring data. So here's our week's worth of earthquakes. The number of earthquakes taking place here. You can see them heavily clustered. You can't even really delineate the actual caldera area. So you can see that big cluster here in the upper east rift zone over the past week. And these are color coded based on depth. So the orange and red ones are the most shallow, yellow, green, a little bit more intermediate, and then blues and purples are even deeper. So you can see the clustering of those quakes near the summit area and in that upper east rift zone. This is a cross section of those earthquakes through this map. So you can see where those occur with respect to depth. And again, those like shallower ones right here, those are the ones that that is causing some of the scrutiny we're seeing. If we look at the earthquakes over the week, you can see this thing really ramp up around the 27th, right? The number of earthquakes per day sitting right around 100 to maybe 150, but then it doubles that and then jumps up even again on the 28th. The 29th, of course, is today. All the data is not in for today. The day's just kind of getting going there in Hawaii, but undoubtedly we might see this be elevated as well once all that data comes in for this 24-hour period. The plot here of location of earthquakes, or excuse me, this is the time. So the earthquakes per day and where those were occurred, and you can see, going into like the 25th of April, you can really see this uptick right around the 27th when we're getting not just more frequent earthquakes, but larger ones as well. So the intensification of the earthquake and seismic noise is taking place, indicating we have magma moving, pushing on the rock, generating earthquakes. And the tilt data generally trending upwards. Not a huge trend there, but this is just for a week's worth of data, so a little bit of a trend upward in ground deformation. And if we look at things over the past month, it's interesting as well. You can see again the big cluster. This is for the entire month. This is the cross section. So you can see again the shallow location of so many of those quakes, the deeper Pahala quakes that we've talked about in the past. And this is probably the most interesting graph here, is going back to basically the beginning of April. You could see the number of cumulative quakes as the red line, and then individual number of quakes per day is the blue bar graph here. But you can really see this thing spike up on the 27th, hence the sort of elevated level of unrest and concern in this area. So things have really ramped up a bit here in terms of earthquake. You can see that again right here on this plot in terms of earthquake activity at Kilauea. So, and then this final thing here is the National Park update, where they mentioned that the Helena Poly Road and some of the backcountry cabins that they have available for folks to use and reserve, those are actually closed. So that would be this area. The Helena Poly Road comes off the Chain of Craters Road. There it is right here, this road that comes off here and heads out into this area. It sort of ends at an overlook out here, and then there's some trail systems you can intersect and some backcountry cabins. But this road is currently closed by the Park Service just because of the increased seismicity and the level of concern there. So we'll have to see where this goes moving forward. Interpretations, clearly, something's happening beneath the volcano. We've got magma on the move. It is interesting that it's over here in the Upper East Rift Zone where we haven't seen it in a while. Most of the seismicity that we've seen over the past few months has been in the South Caldera area and a little bit into the Southwest Rift Zone. We had an intrusion there, gosh, when was that? A few months ago. The magma, it looked like it might make its way to the surface. I remember doing a video on it, but it did not. It remained as an intrusion. And that might be where this lands as well. We'll have to see in the coming days whether this seismic signal here intensifies or if it maybe even drops down or stays the same. So an eruption, of course, at this volcano is always, seems like it's always a bit of a potential outcome, but we'll have to see where this goes moving forward. Lots of data to still look at in the days or hours to come, and it would take a pretty significant shift from what we're seeing here to indicate that an eruption is possible. So I'll keep you updated as best I can, trying to keep my eye on Kilauea a little bit while I'm also watching things develop in Iceland. Thanks again for joining me with this update, and we'll see you next time. Take care.